My name is Greer Ramsey. I'm 31 and I live alone in a secure federal apartment building in Tysons Corner, Virginia. Last Sunday, my older sister Bryn looked me dead in the eye over dinner and said, "Those spare rooms are basically family property now." My mom smiled like it was Christmas morning and added, "The moving truck is already booked for 8 a.m. tomorrow." My dad just nodded and my Aunt Sharon sat there smirking like she'd won the lottery. They thought they were moving in whether I liked it or not. They had no clue that trying to force their way into this building just one step past that gate would get every single one of them permanently banned from federal property for the rest of their lives. Stick around, because what happened the next morning at exactly 8:57 a.m. still makes my phone blow up every time someone in the family group chat remembers it. If you've ever had family treat your home like it's theirs, smash the like button and comment 1 so I know I'm not the only one. Let's get into it. Sunday evening rolled around faster than I wanted. I'd spent the whole day cleaning my apartment, telling myself it was just a normal family dinner, nothing more. The smell of grilled steak drifted through the air as I set the table, same as always when Mom insisted on bringing the food over. But the second the doorbell rang, something felt off, like the air got thicker the moment I opened the door. My dad, Howard Ramsey, walked in first, carrying a huge cooler. My mom, Judith Ramsey, followed right behind him with her bright smile and 2 grocery bags. My older sister, Bryn Ramsey, came next, arms crossed, and already scanning every corner of my living room like she was sizing up real estate. And bringing up the rear was my Aunt Sharon Lynch, Mom's younger sister, wearing that fake sweet grin she always pulls out when she wants something. They settled around my dining table like they owned the place. Dad cracked open a beer, Mom started passing plates, and Bryn didn't even sit down before she dropped the first bomb. "You know, Greer," she said, leaning against my kitchen island, "these spare rooms you've got sitting empty, they're basically family property at this point." I froze with a serving spoon in my hand. She said it so casually, like she was commenting on the weather. Mom jumped in before I could respond. "Exactly. We've been talking and it just makes sense." Judith set the platter down and beamed at me. "The moving truck is already reserved for tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock sharp." Dad nodded along, chewing his steak like this was the most normal conversation in the world. "Yep. Figured we'd get an early start so we're not rushing." I set the spoon down harder than I meant to. "Hold on. What moving truck? Nobody is moving in here." Bryn rolled her eyes and finally sat, pulling her chair closer to the table. "Come on, Greer, you're by yourself in this huge place. 3 bedrooms just collecting dust." "We're family. Sharing is caring, right?" Aunt Sharon let out a little laugh and reached for the salad. "She's not wrong, honey. Blood's thicker than whatever paperwork you've got hanging on these walls." I looked around the table, waiting for someone to crack a smile and say they were joking. Nobody did. Mom actually pulled out her phone and started scrolling. "I've already mapped out the new setup. Bryn takes the master because she needs the bigger closet. Your dad and I will take the second bedroom. You can keep the small one by the laundry. It's cozy." Cozy. The room barely fits a twin bed and a dresser. Dad swallowed his bite and pointed his fork at me. "We're doing this as a family, Greer. No need to make it weird." Bryn leaned forward, resting her elbows on my table. "Honestly, I don't know why you're acting surprised. You've always had more than the rest of us. Time to even things out a little." I felt my pulse in my throat. "This isn't about evening anything out. This is my apartment. I pay for it. I signed the lease. My name is the only one on the paperwork, and for good reason." Aunt Sharon raised an eyebrow and gave me that pitying look she's mastered over the years. "Paperwork. Always so caught up in the rules. Aren't you?" Mom reached across the table and patted my hand like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Sweetie, we're not asking. We're telling you how this is going to work. The truck comes tomorrow. End of discussion." Bryn smirked and speared a piece of steak. "Exactly. I've already started packing my stuff. Couldn't pass up a deal like this." I stared at them one by one. Dad avoided my eyes and focused on his plate. Mom kept that tight smile plastered on her face. Aunt Sharon sipped her wine like she was watching her favorite soap opera. And Bryn just looked victorious. The rest of the meal passed in this suffocating silence broken only by their small talk about traffic tomorrow and which boxes should go where first. Every time I opened my mouth to argue, someone talked over me or changed the subject. By the time they started clearing plates, they were already discussing where to put the extra TV in the living room. I stood in my own kitchen, hands gripping the counter, watching my family plan their takeover like I wasn't even there. That night after they left, I couldn't sleep. Their voices kept looping in my head, the way they talked about my apartment like it was already theirs. I ended up sitting on the couch in the dark, staring at nothing, and my mind went straight back to when I was 16. I had worked every single weekend that year at the local coffee shop near our house in Fairfax. Mornings before school, evenings after practice, even holidays when everyone else was sleeping in. Tips went into an old shoebox under my bed, cash only because I didn't trust putting it in the bank where Mom could see the balance. By the end of junior year, I had almost $5,000 saved, enough for a decent used car that would finally get me out of relying on friends for rides. I remember the exact day I told Bryn. She was home from her first failed attempt at community college, sprawled on the living room couch, painting her nails, complaining about how unfair life was. I made the mistake of mentioning the money, thinking maybe she'd be proud. Instead, she sat up, eyes lighting up in a way I'd never seen directed at me. 2 weeks later, the shoebox was empty. Bryn had taken every dollar while I was at school and used it to rent a tiny salon suite downtown. She swore it was just a loan, that the nail business was going to explode, and she'd pay me back double in a few months. Mom and Dad didn't even ask where the cash came from when she showed them the lease papers and begged them to co-sign. They just signed. The place closed in 4 months. Suppliers stopped answering, clients never showed, and the landlord locked the doors. Bryn came home crying about bad luck and jealous competitors. I waited for someone to bring up my money. No one did. When I finally worked up the nerve to ask for it back, Mom pulled me into the kitchen and shut the door so Dad wouldn't hear. She kept her voice low, the way she always did when she didn't want a real fight. "Sweetie, family helps family." Bryn was drowning. What were we supposed to do? Watch her fail? Dad's version was even shorter. He looked up from his newspaper long enough to say, "Your sister needed it more than some car. You're young. You'll earn it again." That was it. No apology, no plan to repay, nothing. The money simply vanished into the black hole of Bryn's dreams, and I was expected to smile and move on because that's what good daughters do. I stopped asking after that. I took extra shifts, picked up babysitting gigs, sold clothes I didn't wear anymore. By graduation, I had scraped together just enough for a beat-up Civic that smelled like old fries, but it was mine, paid for with money no one could touch. College was the same story. No one offered to help with tuition. Mom kept saying they couldn't afford 2 kids in school at once, and Bryn had already dropped out anyway, so the little savings they had went toward keeping her afloat. I filled out every scholarship form, worked 2 jobs, lived on instant noodles, and graduated with honors and 0 family contribution. Getting the federal job was pure grind. Endless applications, background checks that went back to kindergarten interviews, where they asked if I'd ever been late paying a bill. I said no every time, because I never had a bill in anyone else's name. The offer finally came through right after I turned 27, and the housing program was the cherry on top. Secure building, strict rules, no unauthorized residents ever. I signed the lease the same week. Standing in my empty living room that Sunday night, it hit me how every single step I'd taken since 16 had been about making sure no one could pull the rug out from under me again. I built walls, literal and otherwise, because the people who were supposed to protect me had spent years proving they wouldn't. I thought the apartment, the clearance, the locked gates, all of it would finally be the one thing they couldn't touch. Clearly, I was wrong. The first warning sign actually came 3 days before that Sunday dinner. Friday afternoon, I was wrapping up some reports when my phone buzzed with Aunt Sharon's name on the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, but she never calls unless she wants something, so I picked up. "Hi, sweetie." She started, voice dripping honey the way it always does when she's working an angle. "How's my favorite niece doing in that big fancy building?" I rolled my eyes and kept typing. "Fine. Busy. What's up?" She laughed, that light fake laugh. "Oh, nothing really. Your mom mentioned you have all this extra space now, and I just wondered, don't you ever get lonely rattling around in there by yourself? 3 whole bedrooms, and it's just little old you." The question hung in the air. I stopped typing. She wasn't asking out of concern. Aunt Sharon doesn't do concern. She was fishing. I kept my answer short. "I like the quiet." "Well, sure, quiet is nice sometimes," she went on, "but family keeps things lively. You know Bryn's been going through a rough patch with rent again, and your parents are worried sick about her. We were all talking the other day, and it just seems silly for you to have so much room going to waste when people who love you could really use it." There it was. The test balloon. I told her I had a meeting and hung up. My stomach was already twisting. I've known Aunt Sharon my whole life. When she starts floating ideas like that, it means the plan is already in motion behind the scenes. As soon as I ended the call, I dialed the one person I knew would shoot straight with me. Naomi Chen picked up on the second ring. Naomi and I started in the same training cohort 5 years ago. She's the only coworker I've ever let see where I live, mostly because she has the same clearance level and understands exactly why these buildings have the rules they do. "Hey, I need a reality check," I said the second she answered. I told her everything Aunt Sharon had just said, word for word. Naomi didn't even let me finish. "Greer, that's a coordinated play. Classic entitlement move. They're testing how hard you'll push back before they drop the hammer." I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. "You think Sunday is the hammer? Guaranteed," she said. "They'll show up all smiles, act like it's already decided, and dare you to be the bad guy for saying no. But listen to me carefully. This building isn't regular housing. One unauthorized person through that gate without prior clearance, and it's a federal security violation. They can't just waltz in with a U-Haul and a smile." I rubbed my temple. "They don't know that part." "Exactly. And you're not going to educate them until it's too late. If they try to force it, you let security do the educating. You stay calm, you stay inside, and you let the rules do the work. They have zero chance if you don't open the door." I asked the question I already knew the answer to. "And if they somehow get past the gate?" Naomi laughed short and sharp. "They won't. The guards here don't negotiate with family tears. I've seen grown men in uniforms cry harder than your mom ever could, and still get turned away. This place was literally designed for situations exactly like yours." We talked for another 20 minutes. She walked me through every scenario, what to document, who to notify in advance, how to keep my own access from getting flagged. By the time we hung up, I had a checklist on my desk and the first real plan I'd had all week. Friday night, I slept better than I had in months. I didn't know yet how bad Sunday would actually get, but at least I knew I wasn't walking into it blind anymore. Sunday night arrived faster than I expected. I stood in my living room after clearing the last plate, watching Mom wipe the table like she already lived here, while Dad carried empty beer bottles to my trash. Bryn scrolled through her phone on my couch, legs tucked under her as if she'd been doing it for years, and Aunt Sharon lingered by the door, sipping the last of her wine. I took a slow breath and spoke the sentence I had rehearsed 100 times in my head. "No one is moving in here." Silence dropped so hard the air conditioner sounded like a jet engine. Mom's rag stopped mid-circle. She turned slowly, eyes already filling. "What did you just say?" I said. "No. This is my home. No moving truck tomorrow. No new roommates. No." Dad set the bottles down with a loud clank. "Greer, we're not asking for permission. We're telling you what's happening." Bryn dropped her phone into her lap and stared at me like I'd slapped her. "Are you serious right now?" After everything this family has done for you, Mom's first tear rolled. How can you be this selfish? Your sister is struggling. We're barely keeping our heads above water. And you have all this space just sitting here. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she pressed a hand to her chest, shoulders shaking. I'd seen that performance since I was 10. It still worked on Dad every time. He stepped forward, face turning red. You will not talk to your mother like that, he growled, pointing a thick finger at me. We raised you better than to turn your back on blood when they need you. Bryn jumped up from the couch. You've always been the spoiled one. Good job, nice apartment, perfect little life. And now you won't even share a couple rooms. You're a disgrace to this family. The word disgrace hit like a punch. Mom sobbed louder, sinking into a dining chair and covering her face. Dad kept advancing until he was close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath. You think you're better than us because of some government badge that doesn't make you less of a daughter. You owe us Greer. You owe all of us. Aunt Sharon finally put her glass down and walked over, slow smile curling. She placed a hand on Mom's shoulder and looked straight at me. Careful, honey, she said, voice soft and poisonous. People who cut family out end up old and alone. You'll wake up one day in this big, empty place and realize no amount of locks or gates keeps the loneliness away. You'll die in here by yourself, and no one will even notice. Mom wailed at that, a fresh wave of tears. Dad's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. Bryn folded her arms and glared, waiting for me to break. I didn't. I looked at each of them, Mom crying into her hands, Dad breathing hard, Bryn's eyes full of hate, Aunt Sharon smirking like she'd already won, and I felt something inside me lock into place. This conversation is over, I said, voice steady. You need to leave. Dad took one more step. We're not going anywhere until you come to your senses. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and held it up. Then I'll have security remove you tonight instead of tomorrow morning. Your choice. Mom lifted her head, mascara streaking. You'd call the cops on your own mother. On trespassers? Yes. Bryn lunged forward like she might grab the phone, but Dad put an arm out to stop her. Aunt Sharon's smile faltered for the first time all night. They left 10 minutes later. Mom still crying, Dad muttering under his breath. Bryn slamming the door so hard the walls shook, Aunt Sharon tossing one last smirk over her shoulder. I locked the door, set the deadbolt, and stood there for a long minute listening to the elevator ding down the hall. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the resident portal, and typed the email I'd already drafted in my head after talking to Naomi. Subject line, potential unauthorized entry attempt, Monday, 8 a.m. I listed every name, every detail, attached photos of the moving truck confirmation Mom had proudly shown me earlier, and hit send to building security and the Federal Housing Office. When I finally crawled into bed, my hands were shaking, but the decision was made. Tomorrow they would learn exactly what those gates were built to keep out. Monday morning came with a sky the color of steel. I was already awake at 6, coffee in hand, staring out the kitchen window at the empty parking lot below. By 7:30, the big yellow moving truck rolled in exactly on schedule and parked sideways across 3 visitor spaces. 2 guys in orange vests hopped out and started unloading ramps, while Dad directed them like a traffic cop. Mom stood beside the truck, clutching a cardboard box labeled kitchen, Judith in her perfect handwriting. Bryn paced with a cigarette phone glued to her ear, yelling at someone about being late. Aunt Sharon leaned against the hood of Dad's SUV in sunglasses, arms crossed, looking like she was waiting for a red carpet photo. I stayed inside, curtains cracked just enough to see everything. At 8 sharp, the guard at the gatehouse stepped out and held up a hand. The truck driver killed the engine. Dad marched straight up to the booth, waving a folded piece of paper I knew was the rental confirmation Mom had printed. The guard shook his head once, slow and final. That was when the shouting started. Dad's voice carried all the way to my 7th floor balcony. This is my daughter's building. We have every right to be here. Mom dropped her box and ran forward, palms pressed together like she was praying. "Please, sir, it's just a family matter. We're moving in with our girl. She's expecting us." Bryn flicked her cigarette into the bushes and stormed up behind them. "This is ridiculous. Open the gate right now." Aunt Sharon stayed by the car, but even from here I could see her mouth moving fast on her own phone. Within minutes, 2 unmarked black SUVs pulled up behind the truck, followed by a Fairfax County police cruiser with lights flashing silent blue. 4 men in dark polo shirts with federal badges hanging around their necks climbed out. One of them carried a clipboard. The lead officer walked straight to the gatehouse, compared something on his tablet with the guard's screen, then turned to face my family. He raised his voice just enough for the whole cul-de-sac to hear. "Howard Ramsey." Dad froze mid-gesture. "Judith Ramsey." Mom's hands flew to her mouth. "Bryn Ramsey." My sister's cigarette fell from her fingers. "Sharon Lynch." Aunt Sharon's sunglasses slipped down her nose as the color drained from her face. The officer continued without emotion. "You are all currently attempting unauthorized entry into restricted federal housing. Effective immediately, each of you is permanently banned from this property and all associated federal facilities nationwide. Any future attempt to approach these premises will be treated as a federal security violation." Dad found his voice first. He slammed both palms against the metal gate so hard it rattled. "This is insane. That's my daughter up there. You can't keep me from my own child." Mom collapsed to her knees on the asphalt, sobbing loud enough that people started coming out of nearby buildings with their morning coffee to watch. "Please." She didn't mean it. "Greer baby, tell them it's a mistake." Bryn grabbed the bars next to Dad and screamed up toward my balcony. "You did this. You called them on your own family. I'll never forgive you for this." Aunt Sharon finally moved, walking forward like she was in slow motion. She stopped a few feet from the officer and tried her sweetest smile. "There's obviously been a misunderstanding. We're just helping my niece move some furniture. If we could speak to whoever's in charge?" The officer cut her off. "Ma'am, step back behind the line. The directive came from resident Greer Ramsey and has been verified by the Department of Housing Security. This decision is final." Phones were out now. Neighbors on balconies, residents in windows, someone across the street live streaming from their Ring camera. The moving truck guys had retreated to the cab and locked the doors. Dad kept pounding the gate until one of the federal officers moved toward him with a warning hand on his radio. Mom stayed on the ground, rocking and crying. Bryn alternated between screaming my name and cursing at the officers. Aunt Sharon stood perfectly still, sunglasses back in place, but her hands were shaking so hard I could see it from 7 floors up. The lead officer spoke again, calm and clear. "You have 5 minutes to remove your vehicle and leave the premises before we begin processing trespass citations." Dad looked like he might try to climb the gate. Mom grabbed his arm, pulling him back, still crying hysterically. Bryn kicked the tire of the truck and stormed to the SUV. Aunt Sharon was already sliding into the passenger seat, door slammed so hard the window rattled. The truck driver backed out first, ramp still half down, nearly taking out a mailbox. Dad reversed the SUV in a wild 3-point turn, tires squealing. Mom's face was pressed to the window, tears streaming, mouth moving with words I couldn't hear. By 9:15, the cul-de-sac was empty, except for the cigarette butt Bryn left burning on the ground. I closed the curtains, leaned my back against the glass, and let out the breath I'd been holding since Friday. They finally understood the rules. 8 months later, the fallout finally reached its ugliest point. It started with a group chat I had long since left, but screenshots travel faster than bullets in extended family circles. My cousin Taylor Lynch, Aunt Sharon's only daughter, had apparently kept a voice memo I sent her a year earlier, back when I still answered her occasional "How are you" texts. In it, I vented for 90 seconds about how exhausted I was from carrying everyone else's expectations. Nothing earth-shattering, just the kind of thing you say to someone you think is safe. Taylor edited out the context, added dramatic music, and posted it everywhere with the caption, "Listen to how my own cousin talks about family." Within hours, it was in every relative's inbox from Richmond to Baltimore. The comments underneath were exactly what she wanted: monster, ungrateful, heartless, spoiled. My phone lit up for 3 straight days. Numbers I hadn't seen since high school aunts. I barely remembered second cousins who only surfaced for funerals. They all had the same script. How could I do this to my poor mother? How dare I humiliate Bryn in public? Didn't I know blood is thicker than water? I read exactly 3 messages, then blocked every single one of them. No explanations, no defenses, just silence. The chat died as quickly as it had exploded once they realized I wasn't feeding the fire. A week later, I was curious enough to do what I should have done months earlier: pull public records. What I found made the whole scene at the gate look gentle. Bryn's house, the one she bought at the peak of her influencer phase, was scheduled for sheriff's sale in 30 days. $400,000 in defaulted loans, all co-signed by Aunt Sharon, right after that failed nail salon disaster years ago. The bank had finally called in the note. Mom and Dad's house went on the market the same week. Real estate listing photos showed moving boxes stacked in every room and a price $50,000 below what they paid in 2008. The agent's notes mentioned motivated sellers, quick close preferred. I sat at my desk with the browser tabs open and felt absolutely nothing. No triumph, no guilt, just the cold confirmation that consequences have their own schedule. Taylor tried one last time a month later with a long, tearful apology voice note that somehow ended up in my work email. I forwarded it straight to spam and added her domain to the block list. After that, the messages stopped completely. No more birthday cards from Mom with the same shaky handwriting. No more random thinking of you texts from Dad that always came right before they needed something. Even the extended family went quiet. Nobody wants to be associated with the branch that's bleeding money and pride in public. I heard through a mutual connection that Bryn moved into a 1-bedroom apartment above a vape shop in Woodbridge. Mom and Dad downsized to a 2-bedroom condo near the hospital where Dad's old army buddy works security. Aunt Sharon apparently sold her car to cover lawyer fees and now takes Uber everywhere. Taylor deleted all her social media after the backlash turned on her for airing dirty laundry. They still live within 30 miles of me, but it might as well be another planet. The federal ban notice sits in a government database forever. They can't even drive past the entrance without risking arrest. Some nights I stand at the same balcony where I watched the moving truck get turned away, looking out over the lights of Tyson's Corner stretching all the way to DC. The city keeps growing, new buildings going up every month, and my apartment stays exactly the way I want it. Quiet, paid for mine. I don't miss them. Not the tears, not the shouting, not the constant guilt trips disguised as love. Cutting them out didn't leave a hole. It removed a weight I had carried so long I forgot what breathing felt like. Protecting your peace isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the only way to survive people who would drown you to keep themselves afloat. If you've ever had to walk away from family to save yourself, I want to hear it. Drop your story in the comments. You're not as alone as they want you to believe. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Truly, your time means everything.